Right, let's have some fun. So, what happens when you take an MMORPG and you remove part of what makes it an MMORPG? I'm not talking about hotkeys, multiplayer, anything like that. No, I'm talking about control, UI, and camera. Because when you think of MMO, you think of a perfectly centered, zoomed out camera with a UI that's, okay, maybe not TBC hell, but perhaps a bit all over the place. Yeah, like those big open world games that sell super well on the consoles these days, MMOs often are also about story, questing, and immersion. I mean, just look at the massive rich worlds that these companies pour millions and millions into making. So, what happens when you remove the look and the feel of MMO and you try to make it feel more lush, more premium? Well, you get a more immersive game. One that may even feel, in some ways, more fun to play. And that's what we're doing today, transforming 3 MMOs, Guild Wars 2, FF14, and World of Warcraft. You'll see just how different these games can look and feel, and you'll learn all you need to try it out yourself. Guild Wars 2 has a hidden strength. It's got genuine action combat where abilities actually have to connect with enemies. And then it has a feature they made, but promptly buried in the settings so that nobody would notice. That feature is called Action Combat. Toggle it on and it will make the game control, well, like an action RPG, not like an MMO. Move your mouse and your character will look about the place. Left click, that's your auto attack. It's kind of funny how close to basically a jank MMO version of a big budget open world game that Guild Wars 2 ends up feeling here, perhaps more so if it had native controller support. Anyway, do this, tweak the camera, toggle a few settings, and that's it. The game is wholly transformed. It feels completely different to play, from standard feeling MMO to action combat MMO. And you know what? It fits Guild Wars 2 so well. The scale of the world just shines here. The camera, the changes to it, really just emphasize this scale of Tyria, and it feels great. And honestly, just doing some map completion like this feels fantastic. And man, the mounts feel especially great here. They no longer feel like well-done mounts in an MMO. No, it feels genuinely like a higher budget action-adventure game. Oh yeah, reshade. We gotta use that. So here's no reshade, and back to reshade. Okay, maybe this will be too saturated on your monitor. It obviously depends from computer to computer, but you can tweak it to your liking. So stuff looks great, and it is so easy to set up here. The reshade stuff is just as easy as FF14, albeit with less presets, so I'll have some links down below. Okay, how do you do this in Guild Wars? Well, it's pretty simple. Just go to key bindings and bind toggle action combat. As for your camera, you can offset that to the left or the right if you would like. Doing so will greatly increase the depth in the frame because of, to put it quickly, angles and shit. You'll see more of your character. You'll appreciate more of its armor. You'll feel the weight of its hits more. Then you can tune the verticality if you want, and you're done. There are a few more settings you can tweak for combat, but the point here is that within 5 minutes, Guild Wars 2 can go from feeling like a standard MMO to a full-on action game. The combat just hits a little bit harder when you're the one hitting enemies, not the UI, if you get what I mean. Guild Wars 2 is actually not the only MMO I've done this in. Take World of Warcraft, the lumbering beast from 2004. Over the last 5 or so years, attack animations went from, well, this to this. Yet, with the camera at max zoom and the whole screen being UI elements, you barely even notice it. WoW's user experience does everything it can to diminish the hard work of its art team, and you can change that. Thankfully, I've already done the video on this a few times. The links are down below. Played like this, World of Warcraft does not feel as shiny and modern as a Guild Wars 2 does, because in the back end, World of Warcraft absolutely is a strict tab targeting MMO, whereas Guild Wars 2 has always actually had that action driving it, just with a tab target control system. Now with this setup, you undoubtedly feel Azeroth more, don't you? The scale of things is emphasized. You feel in the world, and when it comes to combat, those animations finally shine. They are seriously impactful. The level of immersion that you get is unparalleled. If you are burnt out in the main game and you just want to feel the world, immerse yourself in some of the old story, just blast out a few zones on an alt, then this is actually a great side thing to do. It's a good way to almost remember the world that we all liked in the first place with Warcraft. And it's also surprising just how well WoW fits on a controller. The new animations have a heft to them, the sound effects are great, and with WoW being so responsive, it actually feels really good in a controller. So then, World of Warcraft, we've had a big victory. Guild Wars 2, another big victory. What then about Final Fantasy XIV? Could we get a MSQ setup that rivals a single-player entry to the franchise? Sadly, the answer to my question is no, but we can try. 14 has the most to gain of any of these games, with its unparalleled narrative and its excellent native controller support. FF14 unfortunately does not have the camera modification of vanilla Guild Wars 2 or World of Warcraft with add-ons, which is unfortunate here. I mean, this is sort of what FF14 could look like with an action camera. Kinda looks neat. This is a bit of a G-posy mock-up thing. Maybe one day it could be reality. I mean, just imagine how much your glams would pop. How incredible the animations would feel. Yeah, right up there with the single-player entry. And funnily enough, making FF14 accessible to the single-player Final Fantasy fans is a major push for the current team, which is of course evidenced by the game-wide trust system push and the reworking of Praetorium. But alas, 2.0 spaghetti code, please understand, is probably all we get here. So what you can do in FF14, and I think the largest thing you can do, is G-Shade. And to my shock, our G-Shade video is actually the largest one on the channel. Honestly, I shouldn't be surprised here. A good G-Shade is wholly transformative. Look, FF14 straight up is super washed out. Its color palette is so flat out of the box, so much more so than the actual art. It's weird. The game's default presentation completely betrays the assets that its team has created. This is not some mid-tone pastel hip arts movie or something. I mean, take a vanilla screenshot, bring it into any color grading workflow, and you'll see it on the scopes. It kind of looks like ungraded footage straight out of a camera. Actually, here's an idea. Hey, John! Hello, John, you're editing this video right now. Grab some of the A-roll from me earlier, and then show it to everybody, raw out of camera. Right, you see what I mean? It's so flat. Now in this case it's that flat because it's a big cinema camera soaking up as much info as possible to give the editor flexibility to perform the art that is color grading. And that's kind of the thing. Color grading is art. It's very important. You never go fully flat without a purpose, and unfortunately FF14 kinda does. Yes, this is something I feel decently strong about, and I think it's something the team is beginning to recognize if you think about the changes to lighting and such that they are doing in 7.0, and a lot of why they're doing that is, I think, to make their dialogue scenes and their characters pop more. So just look at dialogue scenes pre and post G-Shade. Look how toned down facial detail is. Character acting is suppressed in much the same way that the very flat lighting of an old television show is just inherently less dramatic. So 7.0 should do a lot of work here, but you can just use G-Shade. Okay, so that's the colors. But what else? Can you make FF14 feel more immersive? Yes and no. The bad news here is that FF14 has zero automation for this. You can't automatically fade a part of the UI when you're out of combat, like I do in World of Warcraft. Macros are your friend though, and there's a few ways you can set this up. So UI elements can be toggled on and off with this syntax, and Desperius actually has a few great videos on this that I'm going to link down below. I ended up actually just layering my UI for the footage recording setup pretty similarly. That's because, like him, I record footage, so having a macro that removes everything I don't need in a duty, that's just fantastic. Plus, it's more fun actually seeing the incredible fights that this team puts together in their full glory, without UI elements smeared on top of the animations. Now, another option is just binding a bunch of UI toggling to your mount macro, like this. Really though, as long as you cluster your UI together and you don't have elements just spread all over the place, you can achieve something that just leaves the game world feeling uninterrupted. And sure, this will not be as effective as a big sweaty raiding UI, but hey, there's more to life than orange parses. Well, orange. I think at this stage I settle for average. Back to the video though. Another, perhaps better way of doing this is to just create a few UI presets and then swap between them with a macro. This is actually what I do. It's a shame then that you can't do more in FF14, but compared to the vanilla game, I really do think that a tweaked UI with a few macros plus G-Shade can make a big difference. And I think do these things and the story content will just feel a little bit better. Oh, and also, you can just use the hide UI toggle, which defaults to scroll lock, to hide the UI during voiced cutscenes. Like, I don't know about you, but whenever I have a voiced cutscene, but there's subtitles, my eye always just feels like grabbed to the subtitles. So in Endwalker, I started hiding the UI during those voiced scenes, and it just meant I was looking at the characters more. A strange little thing, but especially with the Shadowbringers and Onward lip syncing, it just really works for those scenes, and it helps them land. So then, what have we learned? Well, you can actually get creative in these MMOs, and do it right. And parts of the game, especially I'd say the leveling, they get elevated. It is the sort of thing you could just kick back and relax with for a bit. Sure, it's probably not ideal for raid night, but you know what? One of our farming nights in World of Warcraft, maybe I'll whip this setup up and see if I completely ruin the raid for everyone. I'll report back. But I do think this is a nice way to just kick back, relax, and have a more visually satisfying, punchy game experience. This stuff's great, seriously. Running around Duskwood, it's a little low-B, you know, with the immersive camera and all of that, the sound effects up full. It actually works quite well. Look, I've always been a bit of a tinkerer at heart when it comes to techie things, so maybe I'm just one of a small handful of people who gives a shit about this. I mean, hell, I've lost hours to the photo modes of Horizon and some of the Assassin's Creed games, or, you know, fiddling around with Cine Machine and Unity when I really should have been doing something more productive and, you know, an old project of ours. But I hope that today you had some fun with me. I hope you got some ideas. So if you do anything with this, just send me a tweet. I'd love to see what kind of immersive UI setups that you've made in the games that you play. And with that, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.